as Atiku Abubakar, raised concerns about the fact that the elections dates as proposed by, set by INEC will clash within the Ramadan season, the Muslim fast season. But if you also take a closer look, it also falls within the Christian fast, the Lenten period. And so INEC has said it was banned by the provisions of the Constitution that gave the period upon which elections must hold. Between 150 days and 60 days before the expiry of the tenure. But the National Assembly will be meeting tomorrow. The House of Representatives, to be specific, they appear to be more responsive, more pragmatic than the Senate. They have seen the problem and they say they're having an emergency sitting tomorrow to alter provisions and amend provisions of the Electoral Act to give INEC room to navigate. They are trying to expand the dates of period you must conduct the election before the expiry of the tenure. No word yet from the Senate. But indeed, we can tell you that the Harmonization Committee set up by both the Senate and the House will be meeting today. We don't know whether they will arrive at a decision today. Which of the versions of the amended Electoral Act bill should be adopted? Is it the popular one by the House of Representatives or the notorious one by the Senate? We have a full house today. Deba Abodori is there. We have Kula Dewa and Abdul Osema, the gentleman. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Amishi, and good morning to my colleagues in the studio. Good morning to our listeners out there, wherever you are listening to us in any part of the world. And to our viewers on YouTube. To our viewers on YouTube, we also welcome you. The note of commiseration to the traders in Kano within 2 weeks. The single area of Kano, I grew up in Kano, so single area is not strange to me. That's the hub of distributing trade in Kano. And when you talk of Kano City of Commerce, that's one of the hub. And so when that place, within 1 week, witnessed 2 devastating fire incidents. It's so sad. The president has mandated the vice president to go to Kano. The deputy senate president has donated 100 million naira to the traders. But whether that will be enough to pushing the effects of the terrible losses is yet to be known. And it seems as if Kano is witnessing fire here and there. And I think something should be done to find out the true causes of this fire incident so that it doesn't recur. Well, as regards the watch out for how the National Assembly will navigate. The House of Rep will take decisions that will probably help to resolve some of these problems. I cannot remember vividly now, but there are talks about a particular year when election took place during Ramadan. It's yet to be confirmed. These are things that we need to confirm first. But I have a feeling that what needs to be done should be done. Election dates, if I have to shift it because of religious festivities and religious activity, I don't know. That's the way I look at it. For me, I think.
How do you look at it?
I look at it from the fact that politicians, particularly true Muslims, are very cautious. They are very serious. Politicians are liars. And they don't, it is a crime to tell lies during Ramadan.
And you think they won't do it during Ramadan?
No, and that is why they are seriously thinking that they don't want a clash, so that terrible things, evil things that take place during election, they don't want to be part of it. And so they want to move out of that Ramadan so that their prayers will be answered. That is one of the reasons why this advocacy is really very strong. That is my submission.
Are you certain about that?
That is my submission. I grew up in Canada, and I know the attitude of people who are religious, very, very religious people. Whether you're a politician or not politician, during Ramadan, it's a holy period.
Well, let's start from Kunle.
It's a holy period.
Whether Kunle will agree with you.
Well, this this is a very new dimension to it, Amici. Good morning to you and to all our viewers, my colleagues too, and of course our listeners across the world. It's a new dimension to this story. INEC has done what the law says it should do. But now, Atiku Abubakar, the former vice president and presidential candidate in the last presidential elections, did say that it was coming during Ramadan. And of course, you do know that it's also during Lent. So both Christians and Muslims in Nigeria will be fasting. So the dimension Bayo looked at, I think it's something we should consider too. But for me, it's a strong argument that the Senate should the National Assembly should just leave things as they are, so that we can have good elections, so that people cannot lie. So if we are to follow Bayo's argument, people will not be able to lie, people will not be able to cheat during the election because they will be fasting, and it's a time of piety for everybody. But beyond that, the practicality of the situation is also something that the National Assembly needs to look at. Is it practical to hold an election during fasting in a country where religion is not just a way of life? In fact, sometimes it marks the end of life when things go to the extreme. The third thing I want to say about that is that the Constitution says that Nigeria is a secular country. So should we be looking at moving elections because of religion? Those are questions that I'm going to drop on the table of the members of the National Assembly concerning this.
Well, a very interesting scenario. But Abulu and Tebe, let's look at it this way. INEC was bound by the provisions of the law. It says you must conduct election between 150 days and 60 days, right? Before the expiry of the tenure. And INEC said, we are bound by the law, so they have to issue the notice of election. And some persons quickly pointed out the error. And INEC said, yes, they've seen it, and they work with other stakeholders with a view to correcting it. And I begin to wonder, did INEC not put this into consideration? These are sensitive issues. The very first step that INEC is taking in the conduct of the next election, they are getting it wrong. And it speaks volumes. Now, it's not, you don't just come together and pick a date randomly. We are Nigerians. There are so many things you consider. You mentioned before we came into the studio, issue of the time of writing jam, WAEC. There are so many. In fact, when we do our plan here for editorial events, we consider a variety of issues. We put them on the table. If we are doing a town hall, for instance, forum, we want to navigate through all these challenges. I wouldn't call them problems, challenges. INEC didn't particularly do that. And one thing about this INEC is that INEC appear not to be engaging. They've not been engaging. They are not seeing booby traps that are set for them. They are not speaking up. They are not saying this will work, this will work. I expected INEC to have taken a position on issue of electronic transmission of results, because if the election goes wrong, it's INEC that will be held responsible. It's Professor Amukita that his name will be dragged everywhere. It's INEC people that they drag their name everywhere. So keeping quiet and not engaging, thinking that in his comfort zone will not help them. I think it's time for INEC to sit up and begin to inspire confidence in Nigeria, because studies conducted have shown that many young people are disillusioned with Nigeria's electoral system, and INEC getting it wrong in the very first step speaks volumes.
Amechi, good morning. Good morning, Tebe, Bodri, and Kula, and dear listener and viewer, thank you for having us here. Amechi, it is the holy books that said, give unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and give unto God what belongs to God. The election we are going to have belongs to who? The election belongs to who? Nigerians. And I don't see anything wrong in conducting an election on a fasting period. If Kunle Adewale had mentioned that Nigeria, yes, is a secular state, most people didn't see anything wrong having a Muslim ticket in 2023. If Nigeria is indeed so religious to that extent, why did we allow a Muslim ticket? Why did we allow a Muslim ticket in Kaduna as Governor Rufai had a Muslim as a deputy? So we have to also be considerate as Nigerians. It's a secular state. We have agreed to that constitution. And we cannot, at this time, begin to bring religion to play. Well, whatever the case is, I think that Nigerians are sensible enough to decide. INEC have Muslim persons in that commission that would have advised otherwise. But they kept quiet and they allowed the man to go set trap for himself in this regard. So for me, my position is whichever date the election is fixed, let Nigerians come out and participate and exercise. People are playing football with fasting. During Ramadan, people play football with empty stomach, and nobody had died, nobody was taken to the hospital. And so, how many hours is that election going to take? From morning 8 to around 2, 3, and everybody is done. So I think we should rethink this decision, allow the man to work, and don't create discontent among Nigerians already. The first step the Amoputon is taken. That's my position, really. There's nothing wrong in fixing election on Ramadan.
Yes, Kula Dewale talked about Nigeria being a secular state. And I remember having this argument with some people in the past, and their counter argument is that Nigeria is not a secular state. That what the Constitution says, and I will read from it. Section 10 of the 1999 Constitution states that the government of the Federation or of a state shall not adopt any religion as state religion. What they are saying is that the Constitution says do not adopt any religion as state religion, that Nigeria is not a secular state. And part of the argument, how can you say a secular state? And there is Sharia law in your constitution. I mean, so these are the issues. It's Nigeria.
No, you do not adopt means that you are not sticking to one religion. That's what he's saying there. Amici.
Good morning, Amici. Good morning, listener. You see, Nigeria is a very interesting country.
Yes.
Whether Nigeria is a secular state or you are adopting state religion or not, we're in a democracy. Democracy is about consultation. Democracy is about rule of law, is about rights. And if some persons feel that their rights, religious rights, would be at risk by virtue of a state action or a state inaction, and they have raised it, I think that in a democracy, the only right and proper thing to do is to listen to such people. And I'm happy with what INEC has done. They said they are consulting, moving forward, and all of that. Don't forget elections, like we saw a lot of the videos. People queue up, you stand up for a very long time. In some places, they have to provide chairs for people to sit. And we know what it means. I don't know which part of the Ramadan, whether it's the beginning or the middle or the end of it, that date affects. But definitely we know what it means as human beings, whatever religion you belong, when you are fasting. You try to reduce some form of activity, so that you can go through it. So if they feel strongly that, that is their right, and they've drawn our attention to it, and I think that the most proper thing to do is to look at it.
Be sensitive to those
rights. You see,
because failure to do it, you create
bigger problem than you.
So it will be safe to navigate through all these challenges, and there are other challenges that will come up. So we have to know how to meander through to avoid all the landmarks.
And again, what the Supreme Court said, and what we were also talking about the e-transmission of election results, about being a rule or regulation of INEC is where we have found ourselves. The INEC regulation 2019 provides that elections will hold, the presidential and national assembly elections will hold every third Saturday of February in election year. Remember I said it here, so that I can give you the date for the supposed date for the presidential election in 2031, in 2031, 2035, and all of that, just looking at the third Saturday, and then 2 weeks after you have. So INEC also were going by that regulation. And this also throws up the fact that INEC regulations can run into troubled waters, the same way we had the e-transmission of results, which the Supreme Court said, look, yes, it's in their laws, they can do it, they cannot do it, and all of that, which is the reason why Nigerians are pushing, for us to have it embedded in the law. So it's not somebody's thinking or wish, and all of that. So it's something I think we should also look at. Good enough, the House of Reps will be sitting tomorrow, and they are going to consider the date, because the provision in the Electoral, I think Electoral Act provides 360 days, notice of election, which is what INEC did. You remember I also said that they had between 14 and 15 or thereabout to give the date, which was what they did on the 13th. And
what we are hearing is that they're going to consider moving it from 360 to 300,
300.
And all of that. But what I don't know is whether when the new law eventually passes, that gives us a 2-month grace. Whether it is eventually passed and all, INEC will have to give a fresh notice of election, and all of that. But INEC too also, they are saying in their consultation that they will going to look at, the provisions, like you mentioned, whether elections will be conducted. I think is it 60 days or 30 days to the expiration of the tenure, we had that challenge at some time ago, that the National Assembly had to quickly reconvene and pass to move it to 30 days or 60 days or so, to avoid it. So it's not the first time we're having this issue with, those numbers, and all of that. The good thing is the Senate has already had the emergency session, adopted the e-transmission, which they are looking at the harmonization. But because these 360 and
300 and
360 are not in the proposed electoral the amendment. The National Assembly adopted something less. The House of Reps, which is what they are most probably looking at, so they have to amend that so that at the conference committee we adopt the version of the House of Reps and will navigate this. So, but it's a democracy, like I said. We have to be patient with ourselves, and
And like I said, as we get set for the news now, Nigeria is such a complex country.
It is.
It's only when you attain a position of leadership
You won't understand.
that you understand. Sometimes there are things that happen. But I would say, look and consider this issue. Don't think it amounts to nothing. It amounts to a lot. So you have to keep meandering, keep navigating. Because if we shift forward to March, April now, we are faced with the rainy season, especially in some southern parts of the country. Some voters may begin to shout, "Oh, this is a rain belt. You don't want us to exercise our rights, our civic rights." And another problem we met, but wisdom and consultation. That's why I advise INEC. Anticipate these problems, raise them early enough with Nigerians, consult widely, openly, so that Nigerians will understand your predicament. Because when you fail, I will begin to drag you. Don't say we are criticizing you. We'll put you on. These elections, like Mahmoud did, we spent big sums of the year technology couldn't work. So if we eventually give INEC this nearly 800 billion naira and they make a mistake, we'll come for them.
It's huge money. When I saw the budget, I said, wouldn't that be an INEC chairman going to be a problem? Well, most states don't have, barely have 800 billion as their budget. But INEC, one
just like the CBN governor. Is that your INEC chairman or CBN governor?
I mentioned this one issue, but I disagree with you. And I stick to the statement of my political mentor. He said, Nigeria is not a complex
proponent of Talakawa politics.
Nigeria is not a complex society. Problems become complex when people are not truthful. If you are truthful, if you have vision, I don't think you will have problems. That is why people run into problems. Truthfulness, courage is to solve all these problems.
Yes, I agree with Adeba about it. That's on the part of the leader. If you're truthful and you come with the objective for the people, it becomes an easy task. But when the people you're dealing with point at these other issues, then you know that Nigeria is a complex state. It's heterogeneous, like we're 250 ethnic groups, 300 languages, 1 billion interests, or 1 billion interests to factor in. Let's get from friends. I remember as a correspondent in the state house Asorok Villa, Nuhu, everybody calls Ribadu, Nuhu, and Ribadu call him Nasir, they call Okonjo-Iweala, Ngozi, and Ezekwesili. Obi, these are Obasanjo's boys and girls, like we call them. They were on first name basis. Tight friends, and they were the ones, the brains behind the success recorded by the Obasanjo administration. So why are friends yesterday become foes today, talking about the back and forth between Nasir El-Rufai and Nuhu Ribadu? We'll go into this after your news.
Many thanks for joining us. Good morning and welcome to the mail segment of Political Platform. My name is Fumilayo Emekai.
And I am Maricha Ujiti. First mail coming from Ifani is a writing from Abuja says, permit me to point out that the Electoral Act Amendment Bill passed by the Nigerian Senate at its emergency plenary sitting has have gaps that would enable INEC come up with excuses to justify its failure, such as the glitches claimed by Professor Mahmoud in 2023. The gaps I have observed are: one, what amounts to failure of electronic transmission of results is not defined. Who confirms that electronic transmission of results have failed is not provided for. How many attempts at electronic transmission of results should be made before failure is confirmed is not stated in the bill. And in the event where electronic transmission of election results fails, an election result in the signed form EC8A is relied upon. How these results should be conveyed and added to form part of the total results is not specified in the bill passed by the Senate. To eliminate these gaps in the bill, I wish to suggest the following. One, during the harmonization of the bills by the conference committees of both chambers, failure of electronic transmission of election results must be clearly defined. INEC and party agents at the polling units must sign a form to show that they agree that electronic transmission of election results failed at the polling unit and that they witnessed it fail. And if electronic transmission of election results fails, INEC returning officer for the polling unit shall announce the results entered in the form EC8A, which is signed by the party agents. These announcements shall be made in the open by the affected polling units and in the presence of the party agents. Once the particular form EC8A results is announced, it shall be the final announcement for the said results, and the figures announced ultimately added to the final results. Mandatory transmission of election results at the polling units is the main reasonable measure to ensure transparency of election processes. These measures must come without gaps.
And still on INEC, and Nefio Nitya from Sango Ota, Ogun State, is writing us and it says, imagine amount of over 1 trillion naira to be spent by INEC for 2027 election, yet certain individuals would be saying that electronic transmission of election results is not possible, forgetting that on a good day, we're not supposed to spend such huge amount on election if technology advancement is fully embraced, as most of the cost of logistics would be reduced dramatically. I wish to use this opportunity to charge the new INEC chairman to ensure that the public money as budgeted for 2027 election gives us free, fair, and credible election. We should not spend over 1 trillion naira, and at the end of the day, INEC allows courts and few judges to decide winners of election. Above all, the statement made by former President Goodluck Jonathan, where he pushed for age 50 individuals for presidents and leadership positions, should be the way forward henceforth. This is important because this age bracket understands the use and the need for technology network for operations and today's leadership. Let's do something differently now to get different results. And the time to act is now.
Still on budgeting, Ijo 4 Isife writing from Abuja says, this year's budget defense has once again exposed a troubling gap between appropriation and actual fiscal capacity within the Federal Ministry of Works. While budgets are naturally estimate-driven, a situation where only about 210 billion naira, roughly 9.7% of a proposed 1.065 trillion capital allocation was released cannot be treated as routine variance. It reflects a deeper structural disconnect between projected revenues and expenditure commitments in the ministry's infrastructure planning. When the Ministry of Works proposes over 1 trillion naira for capital projects, yet receives less than 10% in releases, it raises legitimate concerns about the credibility of the estimation framework guiding federal infrastructure budgeting. Capital-intensive sectors such as road construction requires realistic revenue forecast and enforceable cash-backed implementation plans. Otherwise, appropriation remain theoretical figures rather than executable commitments. The reported 2.2 trillion naira owed to contractors between 2024 and 2025 further illustrates the consequences of entering project commitments without secured funding.
This practice creates arrears, inflates costs through delays, and weakens government credibility in the infrastructure sector. The minister's description of the 800 billion allocation as inadequate also underscores the widening gap between national road infrastructure demands and available fiscal resources. The challenge before the Federal Ministry of Works is therefore not merely under release of funds, but a budgeting culture that permits expansive allocations without guaranteed financing pathways. Until revenue projections, appropriations, and cash releases are properly aligned, infrastructure delivery will remain constrained by low implementation rates and mounting liabilities.
And Emeka Mba from Abuja also says, please permit me to air what has been bugging my mind about the festering insecurity in Nigeria. There's a disturbing viral video where kidnappers caught in the act in Abuja, Edo State, named Abuja Police DPO as their alleged sponsor, who brought them to the state for illicit kidnapping business. This is not one-off, as several security operatives have been caught in the act, providing the criminals with arms and ammunition or carrying out the disorderly act of crime themselves. We've had several cases of people kidnapped just few meters from security checkpoints on a road that have several checkpoints just at about 150 meters intervals. Secondly, kidnappers make several calls and live videos from their hideouts demanding ransom of tens and hundreds of millions of naira or showing off the ransom they took delivery of in cash, and they still can't be tracked even when our security outfits have tracking devices. And I asked, how do they make all these dizing amounts of money and still remain in the forest? These pertinent questions need to be studied, analyzed, and answered going forward. I also suggest that the source of every huge amount of cash brought to the banks should be interrogated and ascertained. Let's all get serious and inquisitive in these horrific times, and we never know what heinous crimes we may unravel.
Indeed, that is all we can take on your mails today. Keep sending your mails with your name and where you're writing from to politicalplatform@dagroup.com.
Thank you so much for the mail. Stefan has listed very important gaps that we have not actually considered in terms of what constitutes failure of electronic transfer, because he says if it's not clearly stated, you may see a situation where without even testing the electronic transmission, they will tell it has failed and begin manual collation and all that. So he says, how many times should we try before it doesn't work and all that? So
like the card reader.
Yes, yes. So there's a prescription on a number of times, and there should be witnesses and all that. But what he is trying to prove is that it's a recipe for disaster, what the senators propose. Because you may see fights within polling units. Oh, you didn't try it where it will work, and you're not allowing it to work, and why the other man says it's not working, let's do manual. You begin to separate fight. And all that. Unfortunately, because of time, we can't go into Nuhu and Nasri issues.
Anyway,
maybe when we come tomorrow. Could they have one for the road?
Very, very tasty issue, but very serious issues too, because wiretapping is a serious crime anywhere in the world.
Okay.
And for the former governor of Kaduna State to say on live TV that we listen to, and I'm quoting, we listen to their conversation.
The conversation of involving the national security.
For those so that they think they're the only ones who can listen.
He says they are listening, so
one.
I'm listening, we are listening
too.
And he also raised a query about whether the issue of allegations of importation of
chemicals,
odorless and colorless poison. So he's alleging that maybe it's targeted at some people, and he's asking the National Security Advisor to clarify. The NSA has said the letter has been pushed over to the DSS, that is there for the DSS to handle.
Titanium is very dangerous. You don't obtain it like that. It has been banned largely.
Okay, thank you so much
like
for joining us today. Have a good time.